Most people believe strength comes from holding on. It's holding on to goals, holding on to control, holding on to certainty. But ancient wisdom teaches something very different. It teaches that the strongest force in the universe is not force at all. It is release. This idea is uncomfortable for the modern mind. We are taught that effort creates results, that pressure produces success, and that letting go is the same as giving up. But the Tao teaches otherwise. It says, what you cling to weakens you. What you release returns to its natural power. And once you truly understand this, the way you move through life will never be the same. Letting go does not mean becoming passive. It does not mean abandoning discipline or purpose. It means removing what no longer belongs. In nature, nothing struggles to be what it is. A tree does not cling to last season's leaves. A river does not resist the shape of the land. The sky does not hold on to yesterday's clouds, yet humans resist change with everything they have. We hold on to old identities, old fears, old expectations. And in doing so, we exhaust ourselves. Ancient Taoist texts warn of this exhaustion. They say that when the mind grips too tightly, it becomes brittle. When the heart refuses to release, it becomes heavy. And when the ego insists on control, life begins to push back. You may have felt this already. The harder you chase something, the further it seems to move away. The more you try to force peace, the more restless you become. The tighter you hold on to certainty, the more fragile your world feels. This is not a failure of effort. It is a misunderstanding of power. True power is flexible, like water. Water does not argue with obstacles. It flows around them. It does not announce its strength, yet over time it shapes mountains. This is the power of letting go. When you stop forcing life to obey your expectations, you begin to see clearly. When you release attachment to outcomes, your actions become precise. When you loosen your grip, you gain control in a deeper way. Not control over events, but control over yourself. The Tao teaches that suffering is born from resistance, not pain. Resistance. Pain is natural. Loss is natural. Change is natural. But resistance is optional. When you resist what already is, you create friction inside your own mind. When you accept what is, without surrendering your values, clarity appears. This is why those who let go often appear calm. Even in chaos, they're not detached from life. They're unattached to illusion. There is an ancient metaphor often used in Eastern philosophy. Imagine holding a smooth stone in your hand. If you hold it gently, you can carry it for hours. If you grip it tightly, your hand begins to ache. Eventually, the pain becomes unbearable. The stone did not change, only your grip did. This is how life works. The tighter you cling, the heavier everything feels. Modern culture praises accumulation, more goals, more possessions, more validation, more noise. But the Tao asks a quieter question. What can you remove? What thought can you release? What expectation can you loosen? What version of yourself has already expired? Because emptiness is not a lack. Emptiness is space, and space is where clarity lives. When you let go of unnecessary desires, your mind sharpens. When you release constant comparison, your confidence stabilizes. When you stop chasing approval, your presence deepens. This is not weakness. This is refinement. The Tao describes this as returning to the uncarved block, a state of natural strength, before excess, before distortion. Children understand this instinctively. They adapt quickly. They release disappointment easily. They move forward without dragging the past behind them. But as adults, we forget. We collect emotional weight like armor, and wonder why we feel so tired. Letting go is not something you do once. It is a practice, a daily discipline of asking, is this thought necessary? Is this desire mine or inherited? Is this struggle real or self-created? Each time you release something false, something real takes its place. Calm replaces tension. Focus replaces anxiety. Strength beats struggle. The Tao does not ask you to abandon ambition. It asks you to abandon obsession. There is a difference. Ambition moves with life. Obsession fights it. And only one of those lasts. As this video continues, you will begin to see how this principle applies not just to philosophy, but to strength, discipline, and inner authority, because the less you need, the harder you are to control. And that understanding begins here, with the quiet power of letting go. When people struggle to let go, it is rarely because they enjoy holding on. It is because they believe control will keep them safe. Control feels like stability. It feels like preparation. It feels like responsibility. But ancient wisdom offers a difficult truth. The more tightly you try to control life, the more fragile your inner world becomes. In Taoist philosophy, control is not strength. It is fear wearing discipline's mask. Lao Tzu observed that those who seek to manage every outcome live in constant tension. Their minds never rest, because rest requires trust, and trust requires surrender. This is why the Tao warns against excessive interference. When rulers controlled too much, chaos increased. When leaders forced order, resistance grew. When individuals attempted to dominate life, peace slipped further away. The Tao describes this as acting against the current. Imagine swimming upstream in a wide river. At first, effort feels admirable. You tell yourself you are strong, determined, disciplined. But slowly, exhaustion sets in. Not because you are weak, but because the direction itself is wrong. This is how control operates in the mind. You push against uncertainty. You fight change. You resist outcomes you cannot shape. And over time, the struggle becomes your identity. Lao Tzu taught that life unfolds naturally when allowed to do so. This does not mean abandoning responsibility. It means recognizing what belongs to you and what does not. Your actions belong to you. Your intentions belong to you. Your effort belongs to you. Outcomes do not. The moment you confuse the two, suffering begins. Modern life intensifies this confusion. We plan constantly. We anticipate endlessly. We replay conversations that have already passed. We attempt to predict emotions, reactions, futures. The mind becomes crowded with imaginary control. And yet, despite all this effort, certainty never arrives. This is the quiet tragedy of control. It promises safety, but delivers anxiety. The Taoist sage moves differently. He prepares carefully, then releases the result. He acts fully, then steps back. He understands that gripping the outcome poisons the action itself. When effort is tied to fear of failure, clarity disappears. But when effort stands alone, free of attachment, it becomes clean, precise, and calm. This is the discipline of non-attachment. There is a story often told in Eastern philosophy. A farmer loses his horse. Neighbors call it bad luck. The farmer replies, maybe. The horse returns with others. Neighbors call it good luck. The farmer replies, maybe. Later, his son is injured riding one of the horses. Again, the neighbors judge, and again the farmer refuses. Not because he is indifferent, but because he understands something deeper. Events themselves are neutral. It is our demand for control that assigns suffering to them. When you release control, something surprising happens. Your attention returns to the present. Instead of rehearsing the future, you inhabit the moment. Instead of fighting reality, you work with it. This does not make you passive. It makes you accurate. Your decisions improve not because you predict more, but because you react less. True discipline is not domination. It is alignment. Alignment with timing. Alignment with reality. Alignment with your inner limits. The Tao says that forcing growth produces weakness, while allowing growth produces strength. A tree pulled upward grows crooked. A tree allowed to grow becomes unmovable. You may begin to notice something subtle. As control loosens, anxiety softens. As resistance fades, awareness sharpens. You begin to act when action is needed, and rest when rest is needed. This rhythm restores balance. Balance is the foundation of inner strength. As this video continues, the final teaching emerges. If letting go is the beginning, and releasing control is the middle, then stillness is the mastery. Not empty silence, but grounded presence. A state where nothing is forced, and nothing is feared. That is where we turn next. After letting go, and after releasing the need to control, what remains is often misunderstood. Stillness. Many people fear stillness. They associate it with loss of momentum, lack of ambition, or withdrawal from life. But in ancient wisdom, stillness is not absence. It is presence without distortion. Lao Tzu taught that all movement arises from stillness. The wheel turns because its center does not move. The bow releases power because it is first drawn and held. The mind becomes clear only when it stops rushing toward the next thought. Stillness is not the end of action. It is the source of right action. In Taoist philosophy, stillness allows things to reveal themselves. When the water is disturbed, it reflects nothing clearly. When it becomes calm, everything appears. The same is true of the mind. When it is filled with urgency, opinions, and fear, perception is warped. But when it settles, truth becomes visible without effort. This is why the sages valued silence, not because words are harmful, but because noise conceals wisdom. Modern life rarely allows this space. From the moment we wake, attention is pulled outward. Information arrives before awareness has time to form. We react before we observe. We speak before we understand. We move before we know where we are going. Stillness interrupts this pattern. It creates a pause between stimulus and response. And within that pause lives freedom. Stillness does not demand isolation. You do not need mountains or temples. Stillness can exist in motion while walking, working, speaking. It is an inner posture, a refusal to be rushed internally even when the world moves quickly. This is what gives the Taoist sage composure. They are not slow, they are unhurried. When you cultivate stillness, discipline changes shape. It no longer feels like resistance, it becomes alignment. You begin to sense when action is necessary, when action is interference. You stop exhausting yourself trying to prove strength. Because strength is already present. This is the final teaching of the Tao. Not striving, not retreating, but resting in awareness. From here, effort becomes precise. Speech becomes intentional. Desire becomes quiet. Life begins to feel less like a struggle, and more like a current you move with rather than against. Stillness does not remove difficulty, but it removes confusion. And confusion is what multiplies suffering. When clarity appears, problems become smaller, not because they disappear, but because the mind facing them is no longer fragmented. This is inner mastery, not dominance over others, not perfection. Simply the ability to remain whole. As this video comes to a close, do not search for something new to add. Instead, notice what can be left behind. The unnecessary urgency, the constant mental noise, the pressure to always become something else. Stillness does not ask you to stop living. It asks you to stop resisting life. If you return to this place often, even briefly, something begins to change. Not dramatically, not all at once, but quietly. And the quiet changes last. Return to stillness when the world feels heavy. Return to presence when the mind feels scattered. This is the way of inner strength.